Before dawn, November 1944, the fog over eastern France feels like wet concrete pressing against the skin. American tanks are lining up for deployment, engines rumbling in the cold, steel trembling under the weight of incoming fire. But one unit stands off to the side, separated not by distance, but by policy. These men wear the same uniform, salute the same flag, and bleed the same blood. Yet the U.S. Army labels them unfit to fight, unfit to lead, and unfit to be trusted. They are the 761st Tank Battalion, the Black Panthers. And the war they are about to enter is only half the battle. Hours before being ordered to break the German lines, these soldiers still cannot enter the same mess hall as the white units stationed beside them. They train in segregated camps, sleep in segregated quarters, and march under the gaze of officers who tell them they are natural followers, never commanders. Even on the eve of combat, they receive fewer supplies, older equipment, and tanks so thin that German rounds punch through them like paper. The men know the Sherman is a death trap against Panthers and Tigers, but they also know the Army is willing to send them where casualties are expected to be highest. Some commanders whisper that black soldiers panic under fire. Others insist they cannot grasp complex maneuvers. None of them have seen what these men endured long before Europe: evictions, lynchings, police beatings, and a lifetime of being told that courage has a color. Every insult becomes fuel. Every restriction becomes resolve. But resolve does not erase the truth. They are entering a battlefield where they must fight Hitler on the outside and Jim Crow on the inside. When the battalion receives orders to push through German-held villages, they are told the mission is nearly impossible. The roads are frozen, visibility is collapsing, and enemy armor has dug in across the ridge. White units had already stalled under the pressure, suffering heavy losses. Now the Army turns to the 761st, not with respect, but expectation of sacrifice. In that moment, standing beside tanks marked with a snarling Black Panther, the soldiers understand the cruel irony. The country that doubts their worth needs their bravery. The institution that calls them inferior needs their precision. The nation that denies them equality needs them to survive a mission designed for failure. And they go anyway, because the world will never know their names if they do not fight. And America will never recognize their humanity if they do not win. The deeper the 761st pushes into France, the more obvious the truth becomes. Their greatest obstacle is not German armor, but an American system built to contain them. Every mile forward exposes another layer of hypocrisy, another reminder that the country they serve does not fully believe they belong in its uniform. Before deployment, senior officers argued that black tankers lacked the discipline for armored warfare. They claimed panic would spread across the crew once shells began to fall. They insisted black soldiers were better suited for labor battalions, not frontline combat. These beliefs shaped training schedules, ration supplies, and blocked promotions long before a single shot was fired in Europe. The men of the 761st enter battle carrying not only ammunition, but the weight of their own army's doubts. When they push into German-held territory near Morville-les-Vicq, the battalion requests fresh replacements after a brutal engagement. The response from higher command is cold. White units receive reinforcements within hours. The 761st waits days, then weeks, fighting under strength while still being ordered to accomplish the same objectives. The message is clear. Their lives are more expendable, their losses more acceptable, their endurance more expected. Reports from white officers exaggerate mistakes and minimize victories. Mechanical failures are blamed on the crews instead of the outdated tanks they were assigned. When a white unit falters, the explanation cites weather, terrain, or German firepower. When the 761st faces the same conditions, whispers circulate about intelligence, discipline, or natural limitations. The prejudice is systematic. predictable, and devastatingly effective. Even as the battalion begins stacking achievements no one thought possible, the resistance continues. Commanders caution other units against relying too heavily on the 761st, describing them as unpredictable, despite flawless execution under fire. In private conversations, some officers admit they fear what recognition might mean. If black tankers outperform white units, the foundation of Jim Crow ideology collapses. So reports are softened, terminology is diluted, and praise is avoided unless absolutely necessary. The anger builds inside every tank. It builds as they watch captured German soldiers treated better than black American troops. It builds as they hear white MPs refuse them entry to clubs, bars, and restaurants in the very towns they helped liberate. It builds as they read newspapers from home describing the battalion as experimental, as if their courage were a laboratory test instead of a battlefield reality. And the cruelest part is the silence. The Army never acknowledges the contradiction at the heart of its strategy. It demands loyalty from men denied basic dignity. It demands sacrifice from soldiers denied equal status. It demands heroism from warriors it refuses to call heroes. The 761st enters every battle knowing the enemy in front of them wants them dead, but the institution behind them wants them invisible. What happens next is the reason the 761st Tank Battalion becomes legend. Not because the Army believed in them, but because the battlefield revealed a truth too powerful to bury. Once the engines roared and the tracks bit into frozen earth, no amount of prejudice could stop what these men were about to prove. Their first major breakthrough comes near Morville. German forces hold fortified positions on high ground, supported by anti-tank guns and entrenched infantry. White armored units had already stalled, losing vehicle after vehicle to well-placed ambushes. Commanders expect the 761st to meet the same fate. Instead, the battalion studies the terrain, adjusts its approach, and charges with precision no one predicted. Their Shermans weave through kill zones, advance under blistering fire, and punch through enemy lines in a single unstoppable surge. The victory shocks everyone. The Black Panthers had done in hours what others failed to do for days. Word spreads, not through newspapers or official reports, but through whispers among frontline units. The 761st doesn't break under pressure. They don't flinch inside burning tanks. They don't retreat when ambushed. They keep moving, always forward, no matter how many obstacles the terrain or the high command places in their path. By December 1944, the Ardennes erupts into chaos. The Battle of the Bulge is underway, and American lines are collapsing under Germany's last massive offensive. Bastogne is surrounded. Thousands of soldiers are trapped. Ammunition is dwindling. Medics are running out of supplies. Reinforcements are scattered across frozen roads, choked with snow and wreckage. Commanders know the town will fall unless fresh armored units break through the encirclement. So they call the 761st. The men understand what this means. Breaking through German lines in winter requires impossible timing, impossible luck, and impossible endurance. But impossible is what they have trained their whole lives to overcome. They move out before sunrise, engines coughing in the freezing air, tracks grinding over black ice. German artillery lights the horizon, yet the Panthers drive straight into the fire. Near Tillet, a German armored column blocks the route to Bastogne. Panthers and Tigers wait behind hedgerows, their cannons capable of shredding a Sherman with a single shot. The 761st advances anyway. They fire, maneuver, reposition, and strike again. Their coordination is flawless. Their communications are crisp. Their discipline is unshakable. When a tank is hit, another pushes forward to cover the crew's escape. When German armor retreats, the Panthers chase them down with relentless pressure. The breakthrough opens a corridor that had been declared impassable. For the first time in days, supplies can reach the defenders of Bastogne. Medical teams pass through the gap. Ammunition trucks roll in behind the 761st. The siege is broken because a unit the army tried to sideline refuses to fail. Across the European theater, their record grows heavier and heavier. Town after town, ridge after ridge, roadblock after roadblock. The tally becomes astonishing. 183 consecutive days of combat, more than most armored units in the entire war endure. They capture towns, destroy enemy armor, flank entrenched infantry, and secure vital crossroads under conditions that would shatter seasoned divisions. By spring 1945, even hardened commanders are forced to admit the truth. The 761st isn't an experiment. They aren't a political gesture or a temporary solution. They are one of the finest tank battalions to fight in the European theater. Their battle flags record victories no propaganda can erase. Their actions rewrite the expectations of an entire military. Their courage rewrites the meaning of American service itself. The men who were doubted, dismissed, and denied become the men every unit wants on its flank. They fought longer than almost any armored unit in the entire European theater. They broke German lines others could not penetrate. They rescued Bastogne when the snow itself seemed to swallow whole divisions. But when the guns fell silent and the war ended, another battle began. One without smoke, without cannons, and without headlines. A battle against silence. The erasure starts quietly. Reports submitted by frontline officers mysteriously soften in tone. Words like heroic, exceptional, and decisive disappear from official summaries. The same commanders who relied on the 761st in Europe now write evaluations describing their performance as adequate or acceptable. Achievements are framed as collective Allied victories rather than the work of a single battalion that repeatedly saved collapsing lines. Their 183 days of non-stop combat are reduced to generic phrases. Their breakthroughs are credited to combined efforts. Their sacrifices are tucked into footnotes. The message is subtle, but clear. Do not let a black armored unit become the center of the story. Then comes the political pressure. Segregationists in Congress warned that celebrating the 761st would inflame racial expectations. Newspaper editors fear backlash from white readers. Army public affairs officers worry that praise might fuel demands for integration. One memo even suggests avoiding unnecessary attention toward black units because it might undermine the rationale behind segregated training. So the silence deepens. When medals are distributed, white units with shorter records receive distinguished unit citations, silver stars, and public commendations. The 761st receives scattered awards. No unit citation, no collective recognition, no parade worthy of what they accomplished. Some of their most heroic tank commanders watch white soldiers with far fewer accomplishments walk across stages they are never invited to approach. Back home, the hypocrisy intensifies. Towns that benefit from their victories still refuse them service in restaurants. Military police arrest returning black tankers for entering white-only train cars, while German prisoners of war dine freely in local cafes. Reporters interviewing war heroes skip the 761st entirely, preferring stories that maintain the illusion of a segregated hierarchy validated by battlefield performance. School textbooks never mention their name. Hollywood war films erase them completely. Veterans request documentation of their achievements, only to find files missing, summaries altered, or records misfiled. Some historians later discover entire archives of segregated units stored separately, inaccessible for decades. But the most painful erasure comes from within the institution they served. Promotions stall. Combat experience is ignored or reinterpreted as coincidence. Officers who commanded them overseas distance themselves to protect their own careers. A unit that fought Hitler's armored elite is now told they must prove themselves all over again. The Black Panthers broke fortified lines in Europe, but they could not break the walls built at home. And the country that needed their courage most chose to bury their legacy under silence, omission, and deliberate forgetting. History rarely hides the truth by accident. It hides the truth by design. And the story of the 761st is the clearest proof. Erasing a defeat is simple. Erasing a victory is harder. Erasing a victory achieved by men the system claimed were incapable. That is almost impossible. But America tried anyway. Yet the records still whisper. Veterans still remember. Towns across Europe still carry scars carved by Sherman tracks. The map of the Western Front still shows the routes the Panthers opened when no other unit could push through. You cannot silence steel. You cannot bury a trail burned into frozen earth. You cannot erase the weight of 183 days of combat without revealing what you fear. And that fear is the real story. Because the 761st did more than win battles. They shattered the mythology that justified segregation. They disproved every racist assumption embedded in training manuals, officer schools, congressional hearings, and newspaper columns. They showed that courage has no color, discipline has no color, and genius under fire has no color. Their existence exposed the lie at the heart of Jim Crow. That hierarchy was natural, inevitable, unquestionable. The Panthers proved it was manufactured and fragile, a structure held together only by those invested in maintaining it. That is why their story vanished. Not because it was unimportant, but because it was undeniable. The awakening begins when we say their name, when we acknowledge that these men didn't fight for recognition, but for a country that refused to see them. When we recognize that liberation abroad meant nothing if oppression at home remained untouched. When we understand that patriotism is not obedience to systems, but loyalty to principles, equality, dignity, truth. The 761st Tankers lived those principles in every village they liberated. Their heroism forces us to confront a question Americans have avoided for generations. If black soldiers could defeat Hitler's armored divisions, what exactly were they incapable of? And why did a nation built on freedom fear their excellence more than their failure? We honor them by refusing silence. We honor them by restoring their place in the story. We honor them by teaching that power doesn't erase truth. Truth erodes power. Their legacy is not just military. It is moral. It is national. It is global. The Black Panthers didn't just break the German lines. They broke the mythology that kept America blind. And remembering them is not nostalgia. It is justice.